We are very happy. We're very excited to have Kathleen Halme back as a reader. She's a second-time reader in the Milwaukie Poetry Series. She was here several years ago. Her fourth book of poetry, which is my Multiverse, was named winner of the 2014 Green Rose Prize at New Issues Press at Western Michigan University. Her first book of poetry, Every Substance Clothed, was winner of the University of Georgia Press Contemporary Poetry Series competition and the Balcones Poetry Prize. Her second collection, Equipoise, I hope I've got that right, was published, and her third book, Drift and Pulse, by Carnegie Mellon University Press. Her poems have appeared widely in journals, and she is a recipient of a National Endowment Grant for the Arts Fellowship, a National Endowment for the Humanities Summer Fellowship in Anthropology, and an Oregon Literary Arts Fellowship. She is a native of Michigan's Upper Peninsula and lives in Portland. I should tell you too that we have, she is off her crutches. We thought that she was going to be on her crutches tonight, but we have a chair for her to be reading from. So I think sometimes she's going to stand, sometimes she's going to sit, and she's just going to work that out. So would you join me in welcoming our poet tonight, Kathleen Halme.
Thank you very much, Tom. Can you hear me okay? Yes. All right.
Maybe it'll be a little louder.
A little louder? Should I bring it closer?
Yeah.
I'll move my chair closer.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Oh. And I really appreciate Sarah carrying this big, heavy oak chair over from the library. Oh, he did. Okay. Thank you. It's so nice to see you all here tonight. I really appreciate it. On February 26th, I may be the happiest person in Portland because I am going to Goodwill and dropping off my crutches, and I'm going to walk away from there because this has been 6 months of foot surgery, so it's almost over. Because poetry is the possibility of possibilities, I hope that you'll find a moment of pleasure or something moving in the poems I'm going to read tonight from my Multiverse. And I chose that title for the book not because it's about my Kathleen Halme multiverse, but because we all have those universes within us, many of them. For some reason, I had two cousins on both sides of my gene pool who became exotic dancers. And according to them, it wasn't very exotic at all. So this one starts out with one of those cousins who's now, what can I say, a homemaker in a suburb of LA, and very, very religious. For a few moments, I didn't have a single sad thought. No wonder my fairy cousin shot her pink wad straddling a red-hot poker. She says, "Don't give them anything for free." I wish I had not seen the neck, skewer with a hinge, the long tongue meat, palsied claws pulled in. These hummingbirds are summer verbs ready to erase each other. All sincerity and vice, bamboozlers with power tools. Their manners are impeccable. They trim the drop. Creepy sybarites with a sugar habit can push you out of thought. Birch bark, gray moss, human hair spun into a little cup. I wish I had not looked into the nest and seen the 3 pink gobs with pencil-tip beaks that would not stop. One adult gets lift in the ivy and riffs the shiny leaves, an unmysterious junkie with hypodermic nerve. Okay, how many people in here have written a poem with a hummingbird in it? Seriously? Oh, Tom, good, okay. 2. Yeah, they're just so spellbinding. I wrote this poem for a good friend of mine who always felt she was never cool. And of course she was. But when she was 12 and living in Philadelphia, where she grew up, she wrote her first novel, and she loved Ursula Le Guin. She sent Ursula her first novel, and Ursula wrote back. And they had this correspondence going. So I think that's absolutely lovely. She wore a rabbit fur coat, the apex of uncool, of fur. A January maybe, a knot. Not for 1 minute had she been hip, an impossible posture, a great relief. Beneath the heavy lining hid unmistakable skin, the inside of a rabbit. How many pelts does it take to fashion a knee-length coat? It was a dead woman's coat, and the rabbits were also dead, she reasoned, using what she had. Holding a rabbit is frightening. The twitching nose, the kicking chaos, eyes red with plans. When the neighbors' rabbits escaped their hutch, we used blankets to snatch them in the rushes. When poetry is prose, clothed in the guise of lines, can we forgive the fiction? She wore the coat to college in an upscale liberal town. Her boyfriend disdained her lack of travel, her minor bourgeois ways. How can you live without a garlic press? Moaned the empty bus. She was cold. Wrapped in fur, she was safe inside a pouch. No one bombed her with blood. No one rolled their eyes. I don't know why. In spring, she was safe enough inside to shed the coat on the forest floor and walk back in her hide. I'm just reading one of her books called Waveland about a young civil rights worker down in Mississippi. It's terrifying and incredible. Shapes of the world not realized. I had some ideas, premature but reasonable. The first amoeba seen below the lens was continental drift, a pearl of world lapped in luster. Then the galaxies spilled beads, coma cluster, starburst ring, bubble nebula, spark and world. The multiverse, do we call it nature? The big bang waves still hum inside ourselves. That's room enough and reason. The mirror ball of meaning, strung without a thread. This poem was inspired by something really ordinary, but you know that feeling when you get a new credit card in the mail? Like you've asked for it. Nowadays they don't send you one like it used to be in the past. You just got them randomly, but you get a new credit card and It's called One Who Feels Rather Than Reasons. Reason is the deepening hologram of a peace dove. Or is it an eagle winging the limited pristine, a holding pattern that's quickly swiped? New plastic is an accounting. Activated, a soul feels a trembling in the wings, the moment's anarchy and rush. We want beauty, or we want to be bought by feeling. Alone is not equal to lonely, fourth on the failure scale of our unreason. Image we know, not illustration, confusing the dove with imaginative acts. I was thinking about Sister Carrie Dreiser's book and how she got in so much trouble and what she would be like if she had a bunch of new credit cards in her hand. So the title of that poem comes from Sister Carrie. I come from some pretty hardy folks, 3 generations of nurses, and I remember the first time that disposable shots came out. And my mom brought those home from the night shift, and they were amazing to us. Stay and play nicely, goddamn you. It goes like this. God damn you, play nice, yells the mother. She brings home used syringes, hypodermics to engorge a bee. The croquet mallet's faster than a flower. Salt a bloodsucker, watch it cringe. What hammer kills a tick? We only alter what can hurt us. The bears out back are terror. Let's build a big fire. God damn us, herd of girls out learning our power. I think I had a really kind of charmed and rotten childhood up in, if you've ever been in the UP, has anyone ever been there? You have, wow.
Grand Rapids.
That's the big city.
We traveled north because we like the lights.
Yeah, the Aurora Borealis are incredible. But yeah, it's very, very isolated up there. Good place to grow up, though. Here's a very dark poem called Note. Somewhere there is order, a multiverse of order. I could have sewed that rip in the lining with special strong thread, washed pillows for the refugees, cut new gardenias to replace the yellowed blouses collapsed in the vase, called someone, hoping they'd be happy to hear from me. I could have faced the hard time with the fortitude of my tribe, planted elephant garlic, loved you through this world. Yet I took time to assign my pocket watch, best locket and gems to friends and sisters, spread the satin wedding dress out on the big table for the inevitable. Now the pills are marvelous. I feel the tremendousness of love. The question I think I get most asked as a poet is, where do you get your ideas for poems? And the answer never changes. It's anything that has to do with being alive, anything at all. Part of growing up in the UP was I didn't even know we were considered a poverty area of America. But our library was really, really small and very, very worn out. So this is a fantasy poem. It's called All the Books You Want. It is not always necessary to resist retelling personal experiences. My grade school library was an empty room, nothing on the shelves except one book, Kak, the Copper Eskimo. The raised picture on its cover, a polar bear terrorizes a couple of Inuit kids. The scene is cut and raised like a scar you revisit with your fingertip. Kak at 12, proving himself to the girls in a nearby snow house, hauls home the largest pile of fat. 2-year-old blubber hacked from a dead whale. An ugrug seal, giant, hideous, wet. Gogebic County's phone book listing 5 pages for Wakefield, my town. Hurlbut's illustrated Bible. Make ahead meals. Tell me what to read. The day his father died, my father burned the old guy's books. Karl Marx thrown into the big flame of Mayan codices, the Talmud, the grapes of wrath, some satanic verses, the entire library at Alexandria. Would you prefer to be burned with the books you write or watch them burn? His wasn't a typical auto da fe. His was about embarrassment and shame. He desperately wanted to be an American. Poke the flames and spread the ash on rows of new potatoes growing papery skins. Regarding the 2003 looting and burning of the National Library of Iraq, Donald Rumsfeld had this to say: "Bad things happen in life and people do loot. It's easy to admit the inexorable arrogance of my own country. Secure the oil ministry, support the biblioclasm." My rushing mother writes the wrong address. Rushing in retirement. The box is delivered to a men's boarding house. My sign offering a reward is ignored. What's this? He slits the carton with his one key. Rush of mildew, old books stink. Every cloth cover in a foreign language. No illustrations. These books could be about anything. The librarians lament. Stop bringing illustrated books of Greek and Roman statues into the bathroom. Stop cutting out the maps. Ignore the pimp who reads young adult while his wife turns tricks in the parking lot. Ignore the boy videotaping porn off the computer screen. Books good for baby's brain, the worker claimed, performing a Parisian peel on the oily woman's face. Ooh, this moves. That's good. Okay, I kept trying to scoot my chair up, but I don't have to. I like that. Does this sound okay? Mm-hmm. Oh, good. These 2 poems kind of talk to each other, and I didn't realize that until I was reading them out loud earlier today. Just a couple of years ago, I read Ovid's Metamorphoses for the first time and really loved it. It's a great read. And so this came out of that. There was a deer whom the Carthian nymphs held sacred. I was a god in that body. Out of my head grew a splendid rack of antlers I bore through the high streets like a fine dendritic arbor. My beloved Cyparissus strung a large pearl over my forelock. It bobbed like a globe of thought. He rode me bareback or led me by a poppy bridle. To go about was to be loved. I was welcome in parlors and gardens. Children wove me garlands of gardenia, bleeding heart, and the mistletoe, my darling's bow, released from high trees. Mothers rocking babies on porches offered a breast to me. On the day the blossoms fell, I lay dreaming in the grove and was taken from this life. Oh, the horror of my beloved's error, shot through like any being. There's repeated lines you'll hear in this poem, and they come from Finland's ancient national epic called the Kalevala. That's where my family is from. And I had to write this poem because I wonder if every family, even healthy families, have things they just will not discuss, and they just get, the secrets just pass on and on in some way. They come out in some way. Maybe someone has to be a poet eventually or whatever. But I guess that's called the pressure cooker. Someone called it the pressure cooker theory of poetry, is that someone in a generation finally has to be an artist of some kind and let off the steam. In the Gogibic Range. Blood, stand fast like a wall. Your place is in the heart. The young father carried his shot son home on his back, and he bled out. A hunting accident. Someone hid the gun in the rafters of the barn, and people left the man alone. He took to walking the woods wearing brown. He got work with the power company. Climbing the gray poles, blood stand fast like a wall. He would not wear the safety belt. The voltage bucked him to the ground. Your place is in the heart. And when he came to, he clambered back up. Liquored in blizzards, he spun a white truck. He beat his wife as he beat himself. Blood stand fast like a wall. This man was no fool, but he lived like one. He always looked beside himself, even when he rubbed you with his love, his bristle, spice, and snuff. This family thought it had kept secret what everyone in the township knew. Your place is in the heart. That's a nice one. I have one more poem for you, but don't think it's short because it's a long one. A couple of years ago, there was the Sandy River jumped its banks over by Zigzag. It was a mess, and was that like 6 or 8 years ago? And I just read about it in the Oregonian, and then I drove up there to look at it a couple months later, and you could see the houses still falling into the river, and it was really dramatic. So a lot of the times in my poems, I really believe poetry has just as much right as fiction to use characters and voices, and if we just limit it to our own selves and experience, that's a bit limiting. And if you look at the history of poetry, there's the Divine Comedy and the Iliad and Odyssey. It's fiction, most of it. And as Wallace Stevens said, poetry is a supreme fiction. So I use elements from the real and the imagined and the Oregonian. What's left of it. Poor Oregonian. Flood. Once you were trembling outside your ruined home. Once you were trembling near something worth knowing. Ash to earth, snow to summit, melting to freshets swelling down the mountainside. Deep inside the chorus fire, ice corpses and fissures will never see the sun. Fall, fall the missing all, the dark occulted you. What is first, form or disorder? Color in the shape or color in the border? Your sleep was blank and desolate. Your sleep refused the stream. You doused the pain that never brings forgetting with a deep green tincture pinched in droplets, bottled with a stopper. The forest floor filtered through cones and moss and fungi. Old man's beard waving on branches. Springs washed through duff that only made you sadder. How long it took to build an order. Excuse me. A river makes up its mind as it goes. The water pushed back. In your blank sleep, the river rode. Long lucky, I take what I need. Long lucky, your bread I will need. The river called back in brinks and swells, dissolving banks. The road from mountain to small town coursed as an overblown river. Now the river is the road, and the road is the river. Not far away the stream unloads an outtide to ocean, solvable as you. And you, who made yourself lonely, mute as the plugged caldera, woke in terror to stand on high land wrapped in a blanket, shaky as the others with their lanterns, watching a miniature world below being snatched from their powers, standing on high land beholden to horror, culling and ripping new orders. Boulders dislodge like cannon shots. The living room tilts to pop the picture window and drops like a country falling from a map. The river collapses this intricate kit, a big unthink of unmarked pieces, abundances tumbling, pleasances plunging, the soaked and swelling couches of the dead. She had waxed the arms with beeswax. She had darned the trouble. Here a blue lamp hangs corded in its own orbit, bumping over puffed pink cumulus, insulating the weather it gave. Above, could you see it? Could you see it above as a shadeless bomb swaying upside down? Could you see it as a sensor of reason? Come in or out, the old voice said. She leaned into the grand fir. No one was ever more undone. Gone were her home and broom, gone her flower spoons and yellow quilt, the North Sky Venus and October's full-length mirror. Gone the home she swept with a corn broom, gone the corn broom with its small blue velvet collar. Her common human verbs were gone. Be, do, give, have, make, say, show, take, gone. Her eye became all fovea and saw the crowd of honey mushrooms at her feet, how they paraded from heartwood to hardwood, cascading like a pilgrimage. She saw the gills drop their spores to make a primordium that was more surface than substance. Around the fruiting body spread the universal veil. Its only work was pulling in water, release, collapse, a deliquescence of more of force than of form. The wick's last hiss, then roar. Then she turned her eye inward, remembering the oldest poem. Life ends. How we got in trouble powering the afterlife. She wondered how love gives rise to art when love is failure. The parent doesn't sing, the child won't look back. Alone, the child falls in parts. I heard it being sung. I knew how it was made. The rain told me a story. The rain kept making songs. A scribe filled his conch and dipped his quill in the crepuscule. A scribe in boas wrote on folds of strangler fig paper. The lost word will be sung. The lost world be restored when soul settles into structure. Night came in alone, and yet I would not come true. God of the poem, God of the mountain, God of the rivery word, I have no mother to sing me back together, no father to carve me a whistle when sap rises in the spring. Mother pushed out the gobbets pinned to see-through wings. Father was crushed when the shaft caved in. Go where your gaze is. Clay pipe, hive light. No godspot or goblin becalms melancholies ever. Again the writer dipped his pen and wrote, water brash and water blister, you are a fur-trimmed fact caught in a cosmos. The water bearer who drops the pot that pours into the river of why. Who are you, asked the sinking pot. I'm the one you are not. What led you to death without dying? All rivers flow downhill. Atlatl is a perfect word, I thought at last, flinging a projectile of poplar and copper. I know the world exists without me. What is broken lives on in debris. I threw into the future. It went on and on. More words were scraped into the page. We know the truth, we know the rules, sang the red worms eating scraps. You who are standing are not dreaming. You sleep outside of sleep. Body, soul, making mind up as you go. How sleep becomes you. Grounded with crampons, a crew keeps its footing on the steep slickness, herbarium of mosses and sword ferns and glistening warts. A crew is chopping a tunnel. They are clearing a goat path with handsaw, with billhook, with peavey, with log saw, with whipsaw, they are sawing their way to everyone marooned on the mountain. Here is the cloudberry's gold row you love, and bright orange chanterelles gild in pages. By now, you must be hearing their cadence. The air is new with pitch and destruction. Sap smells rich on their garments. Sap binds their implements to their palms. Now you hear them. Why are you trembling? Thank you very much for listening. Would anyone like to ask a question of any kind? Or we can talk one-on-one. Yes?
You read one of my favorite poems of yours about the rabbit and rabbit coat.
Thank you.
Fiction and poetry coming into it. I just love that. But if you would indulge me, would you talk to us about poetry?
Oh, I seem to remember that. Wow, that was a long time ago. You know what I did during poetry? That was my former husband's project to kind of make the powers that be in poetry, the people who decide who win contests and run the contests, to be honest. That's what he was trying to do. It was excruciatingly painful for me. That's when I was reading the Divine Comedy, and I stayed in the basement a lot. But I understand that the site, this is going to sound really disingenuous, but I never have been on the site, but I understand that it's archived now online. It was like a lot of people throwing mud at each other, and things did need to be cleaned up. It was really unfair what was happening. Contests were, people were choosing friends. Even one contest, people chose, the judge chose her husband as a winner. I mean, it was, and people spend money to enter these. It's like $20, $25. I mean, I sent off hundreds and hundreds of manuscripts for years entering those contests. So I think, have you been to the site?
I took a look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it did change things in a, you know, I think he tried to change things in a fair way. He would write to some of the heads of the contests and say, do you realize what's happening? And they just didn't want to have anything to do with it. So it got pretty ugly because the people who had run things the way they wanted, anyone in power doesn't want to be questioned, right? So, yeah, but it did make... what is the organization? It's an organization with small presses where most poetry is published. They did put out guidelines for running, ethical contests. So that I think it did help in the long run. Ken?
Why was it so painful for you?
Well, I guess I'm just really not good at dealing with conflict and fighting, and I admit it. I'm really awful at it. So I just wanted to write, and it was a very big distraction to have reporters from like the LA Times in your living room. Yeah. Etc. It was in the papers all over the place. So it didn't really have anything to do with poetry. It's just part of what when I was in school people would call po-biz. It's nothing about our art, really, but gee, what's so difficult about being fair about it? Yeah, so I hope it's gotten better. I'm going to probably be entering those contests again. I had to do it with this book again. So go ahead, Tom.
So speaking of poetry and art, who would you say influenced you
Ah,
What poets?
wow, there's so many incredible poets right now. But I always go back to Emily and Walt and Wallace Stevens, always. And then I love my teacher's work, Alice Fulton, because she pulls science in so much in her poetry. And I think Susan Stewart is absolutely brilliant. She's a classicist and folklorist. She's really, really good. And then last week I read a beautiful book by Joshua Poteet. He was a student of mine at the University of North Carolina at Wilmington. And it's called The Regret Histories. It is one of the most incredible books I've read in a long time. He's a very young poet. Yeah, if you get a chance to read that, it's haunted. It's all layers of history, and it's very soulful and beautiful, beautiful book. So those are some things I go back to, but I read so much.
I was going to say that. It sounds like you read a lot.
Well, yeah, it was my survival. Like probably most of you, you put your head in the book as soon as you learn to read, and it hardly comes out again. So that's the fantasy about all the books you want thing. So
We have a hard time giving away the ones we haven't read in 10 years.
yeah, Powell's is really nice for that.
And the pond house.
I just saw that. Is that you can bring used books there?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
You take them to the library.
You take them to the library and they'll give them the pond house, so.
Thank you. Okay.
Hanging out that way. Every chance I get, I'm over there. Can I ask a
Sure.
question?
Of course.
Have you written about the Northern Lights? And if you did, where can I find it?
No, but it's like there's poems you want to write, and you just think, will I be old enough ever to get to that poem? You just hope.
They're so incredible. I would love to see how poets put that on.
Yeah. There's like curtains of colors.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible. But maybe living with it, it was just sort of part of the scenery.
I never got used to it. Just like I can never get used to how beautiful it is here. I've lived here almost a third of my life, and I'm still like Gaga. I guess that's how it is living here. Sir.
You see, the more I listen to, and the longer I listen to you read, your poetry became more and more wonderful for me.
Thanks.
It was as if, I'm a big analogy person. It was like a wine where you're tasting the flavor of discovery. And let me explain why. Because it seemed like in your lines, you were keen on vowels and you were keen on consonants. And the way that you interwove them in the syntax of your line was beautiful to me because it wasn't so much contrived as if a music, but yet you could hear, if you listen closely, you could hear music in the line, an overture that was soft, not over. And I wonder does that figure into your writing, because it gave a nice tannin to your. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I wanted to express that.
Thank you. That's the compliment that means very, very much to me because I work really hard on that. That's what I love most in poetry is that kind of verbal trance you go into. And I did study a lot of prosody and how to, not so I could write Shakespearean sonnets, but so that you can get the rhythm in there. And the vowels too, and I think it was partly growing up and hearing like two languages. Hearing Finnish, if you've heard it, it's really vowel-y, really, and not knowing what it meant.
Can you say
So-
a few phrases?
Hyvä päivä. Minä haluan olutta. Missä sauna on? Hello. I would like a beer. Where is the sauna? That's about my level of Finnish. It's not very good. And the Finnish people say they don't even know how their children can learn how to speak it. It's got all these case endings you put on the end of words. Like you don't say, that's my house. You say, the house is on me. I won't go into it. I tried to learn on my own. I was too old. You gotta be like before 12, before that language facility hardens up in there. But it still gave me new rhythms in my head. And then I credit the Lutheran Church with, that was my first poetry. I got a lot out of that. It wasn't harmful in any way. There was a lot. And then, yes.
First of all, this is the first poem I've ever seen the word dendritic in. I love words, so that was a nice draw into that. But what is your discipline for writing? Do you have?
Oh, it's been horrible lately because I'm so distracted by the pain in my foot, so I can't sit at my desk. But when I'm in my usual working phase, I'm doing part of it now, but I like to get up before it's light, and I read poetry, not my own, for a couple of hours to get me inside that bubble of language and just to warm up. And then I often go in my notebook and write somebody else's poem out by hand. That's another way to get really close to language. And then I'll be at my desk for 4-5 hours, maybe. I don't do that on the weekend. That would be crazy. You need to do other things that aren't about words. And then I like to do something really physical, like work in the garden or something else like that, see friends. But yeah, it's the ritualizing what's important that makes it happen. As you all know who are practicing poets, you can't wait around for the good day when you feel like, wow. So it's a lot of slogging and many, many drafts. So I can't wait to be able to go through that again. I thought, I'm gonna have all this time, I can just write, but I've learned new forms of patience and just what pain can do to your brain. It's really distracting. So, yeah. Does that?
I know when you're in pain, it's hard. I was just thinking more of we'll call it normal.
Normal, yeah. Oh, I'm so looking forward to it. Yeah.
Let me say one more thing.
Sure.
There's one line in your poem I know I'm going to carry away with me. It was the poem about the burning of books at the library. I think it was a line, please forgive me, because my memory's not that good at this age. It was about, are you willing to be burned with the books that you... Something like that.
Yeah, in history, when there's a biblioclasm, when they want to burn the libraries, right? Like burning the library at Alexandria in classical times was the ultimate, and then in Iraq more recently, the National Library. They used to give people a choice if they were the writer. Do you want to watch your books burn, or do you want to burn with them? Sometimes look up biblioclasm on Wikipedia, and you'll. Luckily, we're not put to that test very often, but I'm so impressed and moved by the kind of programming you're doing here. That's amazing. People who, we all have heard about the story recently of the poet where is he? He got put to jail instead of. Thank you. He was going to be beheaded for his apostasy, but instead, with international outcry, he's been jailed for 7 years. 8 years. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't have anything to whine about. Thank you very much for your attention.